contract a lot, and it's really important for me to make sure that the contractors that we bring in bring a nice level of diversity to our organization.
Nice. And Laura, if you need me to repeat the question, just let me know.
This is a big question.
I'm going to jump in it, and if I'm off kilter, point me in the right direction. So I think, I think training is key, and I think when we often think of training, it's mandatory training around DE&I, and we've all been there, and we've all checked that DE&I. Yep, I went to training. But I think what's most important is the voluntary training.
Yeah.
Those that raise their hand and say, I want to learn more. So we have several ways that we offer that at the bank. So we have several mentoring circles. 2 that are focused on DE&I. Nice. One is a women's focused, so focusing on gender issues. And those are voluntary, and we've grappled with some really difficult conversations. And I think when you have women or a group of people come together for a common goal of learning further about DE&I or women's issues in the workplace, because they entangle quite a bit. I think, and I'm going to show my age, kind of going to the Breck commercial, and those that have been in my circles, you tell 2 people and they tell 2 people and they tell 2 people. And it's a way of spreading knowledge in a very informal way, which I think is really important as we try to educate and train our managers, to your point. Critical. But I think the awareness also at the employee level. I think our peers can help raise people into, I think part of the question was promotions and opportunities. Yes. Having that exposure, because often when you are in a voluntary training center situation, such as a mentoring circle, you've got multiple levels in the organization that you're learning from and they are learning from you. And so it gives you some of that exposure. Certainly looking at, an executive sponsor or a formal mentor or mentoring program. I know in our women's group, we've spoken a great deal about how do you go about finding a mentor, somebody to guide you and lift you and answer your questions, and to assist you with your career and your balance. And so I think the informal piece is so important because we've all checked off the DE&I box, and to be able to promote and give training and development opportunities, we've got to see people and we've got to listen.
Oh, that's huge. Seeing people, she said. We've got to see people. That is really, really imperative. Thank you for that, Laura. Martha.
So the question was about training opportunities and what you do around DE&I. And I think there are 2 levels. And first of all, I'm going to use the term what you do to educate people. There's now a movement, again, talk about language, where people say you can't train people, you train dogs. You do not train people, you educate people. Okay, so, so I am going to be a little politically correct on that particular point and say, I look at education really in like 2 distinct ways. One is, what are you doing in your organization so everyone gets on the same page in terms of DE&I? And I've often worked with organizations. I worked with a big university once, and literally everyone from the faculty and the president and the cabinet on down to the students had to go to this program. And part of it was about, let's get in the same language. What are we talking about when we talk about diversity? People have different, meanings of that. What do you mean by that? Unconscious, what is it? That unconscious bias stuff. Microaggressions, white privilege, all of these, freedom of speech. Like, what do these words mean? So that you have a common language within your organization. I also think it's very, very important for staff to understand, what's the business case for this? Why in the heck are we doing this? Okay, and so what does it mean for the organization? What does it mean for the staff? What does it mean for your customers? And why is it, what's the big deal around this? So that people get in their head that, first of all, we know there are all kinds of statistics about companies and organizations that have diversity outperform other organizations in many big ways. They also have staff that usually are more engaged and more productive, and also it's used in some places to get business. People probably remember, the old Nova. in Mexico, there was a car, and they called it Nova. Remember that?
Yeah.
But Nova means it doesn't go in Spanish.
Yep.
No go. Okay? So that was a bomb. All right? And there are people in the organization that finally raised their hands and said, we can't use that. Organizations like Avon, when they first started having products for different types of skin for women, it was their employees who came up with that. Through some of the training, educational programs that they have. But having a common language, also getting with people and teaching them about, again, the microaggressions and, things that we don't even know, that we are, discriminating or saying something bad about a particular group, and you just don't even know that. But that can land you fired. That can land you in the news. You may remember, like not too long ago, about this time last year, in Duxbury High School, right down the road, the football team, the coach was using racist language to make calls. He was calling, Auschwitz and rabbi, and people were saying, I didn't know that was a crime or whatever. So really teaching people, and this coach, it was all over the news nationally, internationally, and he ended up getting fired. Okay, so really getting to people so that they know what are the things that bother people in terms of words, in terms of actions, in terms of language. The other piece of it is around what you do for leadership excellence. I keep saying this. Many organizations are sort of starting to get into, DEI training for their managers, but a lot of them, quite honestly, have a long way to go. So when you are a manager or a leader, you've got to understand that basic stuff, but you also have to understand, how do I manage across race, across gender? How do I, do performance appraisals for people from different backgrounds, and some that, are going to toot their horn just fine, and others are coming from cultures where it would be an embarrassment to say that I've done X, Y, and Z. And so how do I look at that? The other thing in terms of that is the law and the legal piece for leaders around what they can and cannot say, because it can bring a lot of legal woes, but also it's not productive for leaders if they are saying or doing the wrong things with staff. And also looking at, like, how do you mentor people that I may not be comfortable mentoring, or I'm a man and you're asking me to mentor a woman? I don't know. I don't want to go behind those closed doors. People could think things. But so thinking about
That's
both
real.
the perspective from the employees and what you're doing generically, and also from your leadership team.
Excellent. Thank you. Very great points so far. So my next question, Kara, what are some ways to pinpoint pay gaps within your company in order to promote pay equity? And I know that you have a small organization.
Yeah, this is a little, honestly, this question is a little bit difficult. I know in the past when I've worked in other organizations, we really have made an effort. So much of what we do, like I said, is grant funded. So it's really, it's the pay rate is set, and it's going to be that rate, regardless of obviously, given what that salary is going to be due to what the job is. So if we, for example, we recently, the last position we hired for was going to be for a grant regarding behavioral health. So we were looking for someone that had that background. It was a more senior level position. But regardless of who filled that job, the pay rate was set based on our grant. So much of our work is, I think, aligned with what our grants are funded with. So there aren't a lot of pay gaps in what we are seeing.
Because you're a nonprofit.
We're a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And a lot of our grants are cost reimbursement grants, so we're set up a little bit different. So we might not see what Laura might see, but we do provide, I think, education to our staff to ensure that if they are that they're being paid equitably in the event that they are looking in the future. I mean, I want to make sure that my staff is always seeking professional development. We do internal professional development. I want to make sure that my staff is well trained and ready to seek other opportunities, whether they're internally within my small organization or within Mass Hire, because I do strongly believe in promoting a culture in which staff can kind of climb that ladder, so to speak. Even though we're a small organization, Mass Hire is a much larger organization. So they need to make sure that not only do they have the training, but that they know how to sell themselves and, I think, ask for the salary that they're going to need when they're interviewing.
Interesting. Thank you. You know, I just was thinking, and Laura, I'm sorry, we'll move on to you as well. But do you take under consideration if someone maybe doesn't have the training or the degree, if say they have years and years experience? Is that something that's considered? And I'd like you all to ask this question.
Absolutely. I think I know for us, we do. There are certain jobs that would require education, but it might be education in lieu of, or, but we also encourage folks to go back to school. Like, we would certainly do that. We have had folks attend the community college. I've had folks attend professional development at the community college. I really think that's important. We do a lot of professional development, whether it's at the community college or bringing someone in. So the state does a lot of professional development, different things that we may need. So I think, education, it doesn't necessarily have to be something at the community college, but continued learning is essential to any job. I really firmly believe that. And it could be really anything. It could be something on social media, training on social media, or a computer-based class, or whatever it may be to help you do your job better, but also those jobs in the future. I think aspiring your staff to move forward is always important. And that is something that I will always encourage my staff to do, as I really feel that as a leader, it's my job to encourage my staff to want to continue to promote themselves. And whether they're, just starting out their career, or they're mid-level, or even somebody, my age or older, I want to continue learning. I think it's important. It's valuable. We can't stop learning.
Yes.
Can I just say one thing about the whole issue of education? There's been a lot in the news recently about people requiring certain degrees or whatever, and people are asking, do you really need a degree? Do you need a degree to answer the phone? Okay, and there's a shortage of people that want to kind of do that work. And then people are also saying, all right, not everybody goes to college and not everybody graduates. And of course,
not everybody has access.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And of course, people point to the fact that Mark Zuckerberg, that Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates, they were college dropouts.
Right.
Well, look what that did for them. Okay, and I'm a big proponent for education. Again, I've worked in the Harvard system for years and years and years.
But not everybody is cut out for
that. Needs to do that. And so, especially in this labor shortage, when you're looking at jobs, really look at, can they do that? And also, again, experience does account for a lot in jobs. And if they've had a career trajectory where they've been going up and they're learning and they're doing that professional development stuff, that may be just fine. Thank you.
And let me take that one step further. A lot of our high schools have innovation pathways and Mass Skills Capital grants, and that is giving our high school students a competitive edge that is really going to help them enter the workforce already a step ahead. So if they cannot afford to go on to college, or maybe they don't want to, maybe they're just not ready and they want to work for a few years, they're going to have those skills that are needed because they acquired them either at a comprehensive high school or one of our vocational schools. And so, our schools here on the Cape and the Islands have done a phenomenal job at going after a lot of these grants that are giving kids a great competitive edge.
That's really good to know. Thank you. Laura, I'll repeat the question.
Well, can I go back to education versus experience? And so from a strategy perspective, in this time of having such limited talent, and our footprint has always had limited talent. We've got a lot of second homeowners and et cetera. We have done an internal audit of our job descriptions, which I spoke about our job descriptions earlier as kind of the starting point, and really challenging our managers and our leaders on, does the job really require the degree? Now, we're very fortunate at Cape Cod 5. We have a great tuition reimbursement program. We also have a student loan repayment, debt repayment program, so where the bank will assist you in paying off your student loans. So not only will we assist you to get your degree, we will then pay down with you your loans that are outstanding.
Nice.
Yeah, but entry is still tough. And as I said, Four Cs is a wonderful institution. It's we leverage it a lot at the bank, but recognizing that not every job requires a degree, but the experience that our candidates can bring to it is more important than the education. I think, if we go back and we look at the history, what was the nexus of making education the requirement of the degree, or the degree required for the job, and really what was that? I mean, there are certain professions we can say, yeah, they should have a degree, but in general, I think we use that to source out candidates instead of sourcing in candidates. And so we have done a full audit and have really challenged our experience versus that formal education piece. And then from a pay, can I go to the next one? Sure. So pay equity and pay gaps, really important. As you know, CEO today is a female, and so female and women issues, gender issues are really important in closing that equity gap, not only from a race perspective, but also a gender perspective, has been really important. I can tell you that we audit our annual appraisal system and our rankings, and we audit them through the lens of DE&I, particularly gender and race. We then look at merit awards and make sure that they are aligned consistently. And so we should have somewhat of a bell curve. It's trending a little to the right, but that we should see this similarly, male, female, and then against the various races that we have at the bank. So we are not underpaying based on, so we are equitable in our application of our merit system. When we do hire, promote, or transfer, we do a pay analysis on every position. We look externally and we use multiple salary sources and data to determine what our pay ranges are. And from there, we look at who are our incumbents, who do we have sitting in the position, who's in that grade across the entire organization. So where it may be an IT systems person, they could be in the same grade as perhaps an HR talent manager. So same grade, same level of experience, same pay. And so regardless, male, female, et cetera. So we do a lot of work around comp, and there's always a lot more work, but we work really hard to be equitable and close that gap. I think the state of Massachusetts assisted many employers with the state equity, pay equity, and I know a lot of HR people that really scrambled. We do use a third-party consultant to assist us with our data analysis also, to make sure that we are in fact not having any pay lags.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think it's really important, as you said, to constantly survey the market, to do your market adjustments, and to see whether you can pay it or not, but to know like where your salaries are in relationship to your competition or to other people, in your community. We do know that the gender gap is alive and real. Yep. Women who work full time make 83 cents. Of a dollar for non-Hispanic white males. And black women and Hispanic women also, I know for black women it's like 64% of salary of a non-Hispanic white male. So that pay gap is really important. Something that I've seen that I think people need to also kind of pay attention to when it comes to pay is many organizations are paying sign-on bonuses or bonuses to new employees. One of my favorite stores in all the world is like not too far from here. I won't say the name, but they just changed their name to the CTS from something else. Yeah, and so I love going in there. People are always so nice. One day there's a lady that is like, I've been going and seeing her for a gazillion years. And she was really sad. And I said, you seem really sad. She said, I'm really upset. And I said, what are you upset about? She said, do you know they just gave these new people coming in here $1,000 sign-on bonuses and we didn't get anything. And we've been working short staff and moving forward. I don't like it. And you know what? Tomorrow's my last day. And so I felt sad, but also, thinking, boy, did that employer really think that one out? So, you got to make sure that, it's great that you're doing sign-on bonuses or whatever, but remember the people inside because they have choices and they will do that. I also want to say that, I get asked a lot of time, well, it's great that, you're talking about all of these big organizations or whatever. I do talk about small organizations and I work with both, right? But what about the mom and pop stores here on the Cape?
Yes.
Okay. And what I say is this is
and the
equally,
POC owned.
This is equally as important for that, for that mom and pop, store, that mom and pop, place where people go, motels or hotels or whatever. But it's not always in the money.
Right.
It's not always about showing me the money. Right. It also is about, and more, you know why one of the number one reasons that people are leaving for the Great Resignation? Because they're not working in organizations where they feel those organizations, have purpose. Exactly. And the organizations aren't like helping them to have purpose in their lives. Exactly. Okay? Attaboy, attagirl goes a long way with people sometimes, okay? And if you're treating people well, they're gonna be your goodwill ambassadors. They're gonna go out and tell the world, about what you're doing. And you're not gonna have a labor shortage necessarily because people want to be treated right. So I think the money is important, but also how you are treating those individuals within your organization is also important.
Yes, and I will just add, go ahead. I was just going to say, I would just add making sure that your employees feel valued.
So if I could add to that,
yes,
you're absolutely correct. And I think a big part of the culture is creating a respectful culture. We talk a lot about what respect means at the bank and as part of our culture, because the studies show that in a respectful work environment, not only will you retain your employees, they will be highly engaged.
Yes.
And
that actually
it ties right into what you were saying,
it's true.
Martha, in terms of,
Absolutely. I think we saw a lot of that too with the pandemic, even with a smaller organization, just making allowances. I mean, the pandemic, we did stay open. We were in person, but we made allowances. We had to. And it kept our employees wanting to come to work. And they were grateful and happy to come in. And, I'm so grateful to have my employees come in and that they want to be there. And we eat lunch together most days. And it's just like that time to laugh a little bit and I want to get to know my team. And I think it's great that they want to get to know me, not just as their boss, but as a human being. Right. And I think that's really important. And it's nice to have a team, quite honestly, that really loves coming to work. And I'm very grateful for that.
Nice. And that actually, what you were all talking about just now in terms of culture leads into our next question. So, Kara, I'll start again with you. How do you instill a more diverse culture that provides equal opportunities for minority employees?
That's a great question, Tara. I mean, obviously it's been established that we don't have a lot of turnover, but we do have a diverse workforce. And I think when we will, and when the time comes and we are hiring, I think it's all on how we source those positions and just the verbiage when we have hired in the past. My executive team's been a big part of that, whether they're involved in the hiring, whether they're involved in the actual verbiage of the posting, just to make sure we're dotting all our I's and, the right
language is important.
Right,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think we'll be, just that sourcing, making sure we're getting that posting out to the right folks. And, I think Laura said it perfectly. At one time, when I started my career, EEO I worked in HR, and it was a checkbox. I was a recruiter, and that was it. And we've come so far from that point. And so we really want to make sure that we're creating that environment where people want to come and work here. So we want to keep doing what we're doing and making sure that we're providing trainings, that we're engaging in the community. Even with our volunteers, we have a really robust internship program with our high school students and our college, with the folks over at the college. We have college interns as well. And that also has a diverse population as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Kara. Laura?
What was the question? You finally got me.
No problem. How do you instill a more diverse culture that provides equal opportunities for minority employees? And I hate the word minority. I'm just going to throw that out there because I just do. But anyways, go on.
So I think it's not only building a diverse culture, I think it's the inclusion culture. And I think it ties back to a lot of the things that we were just saying in terms of
inclusion culture. I like
everything that we do should be through the lens of DE&I. Whether it's our vendor selection, employee selection, products that we're offering, allyships, where they can see people like them leading small groups, teams, divisions, departments, and et cetera. But I think it is creating a culture that people want to come to work every day, and they can bring their authentic self every day, and they can be themselves, and they feel comfortable in sharing their opinions, I think is really important. Again, it goes back to then listening. What are we hearing and reacting to that to improve whatever it is that there may be an issue with.
Excellent. Thank you. Martha?
I think that it, in terms of your diverse culture, it starts with really you looking at what is your mission, what are your vision, what are your values, and are you incorporating that? You're seeing a lot of organizations, not in the mission statement so much, but in their vision statements and also in their values. And some people are calling them pillars now. I don't know if you've seen that. They're not necessarily, some people still call them values, some people call them pillars. But they are making sure that you know that DEI is part of what they are concerned about. The other thing is that some organizations are taking bold steps and making sure that people that are both their customers and their workers. On the Cape, like I said, when I first came to the Cape, there was really, I think my family made the diversity in our community. Seriously. But now I'm surprised. A second home for me is Okinawa, Japan, and Negril, Jamaica. And literally, I'm shocked going into stores at how many, and I know a Jamaican accent, so I can ask people, you're Jamaican, right? Yes. So people from Jamaica and Haiti and Brazil and El Salvador and Russia. And so really making sure that we're reaching out to those communities, reaching out to those people, doing job fairs, doing career fairs, letting them know their leaders, bringing them in and talking with them about things. The other thing that's really interesting that people are making to instill diversity in their organization, and again, it gets back to your pocketbook. And a CEO years ago, I will always remember him saying this. It was a CEO, his name is Manny Ferris, and he was the CEO of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. And he said, if you hit people in their pocketbooks, their minds will follow. If you hit people in their pocketbooks, okay? So if I'm giving you a performance appraisal and your adjustment, is based upon how well you're doing, and I've asked you a question on your performance appraisal about diversity, okay, and you didn't quite reach your goal, you're not getting your full amount of merit or of compensation from that. And so really thinking about instituting certain things where people really have to think about, diversity and making it a better place in an organization. I also want to say it's really important not just to talk the talk, but also all of your materials, what you put out there online, your website. I've had to talk with a number of organizations recently because I would go on their website and they were trying to promote older people or individuals with disabilities or people of color. And I said, but I go to your About page. I go to your career page where it always says, join our team, become part of our team. but I don't see any diversity in those pictures. So your verbiage is wonderful. It's great, but you've got to match your story. It's called multicultural marketing is what is the term that people are using. So make sure that, what you're sending out there internally is also going out externally so that people can see that you are genuinely interested in diversity, equity, inclusion. And just don't put that one black face there or that one Asian face or whatever. Make sure that it is in fact diverse in terms of what you're doing.
Yes, talk the talk and walk the walk. I like that. Thank you, Martha. Okay, so Kara, how do you recruit diverse talent?
I think you need to know your community. So in our case, we service the entire Cape and the Islands. We really need to know our entire region. We need, and likewise, we need people to know who we are, and not just when they need a job or an employer is hiring. They need to know who we are at all times. And so that's our job. We need people to know our messaging so that when we are hiring, they're going to, our postings will catch people's eyes and they'll be aware of what we're doing. So that comes across in our strong messaging. And just as Martha was saying, we need that messaging. It needs to be strong. It needs to be impactful. And that will help us better, I think, get stronger candidates that are diverse in nature, that are from the Cape and not off the Cape. And so I think it will come in messaging. I think our board engagement when we are hiring, our executive team, getting the messaging out not only to our team, the folks over at the Career Center do a great job of helping us post our jobs, but again, sourcing that position and really knowing our region and who's in it, I think is really important.
Yes, thank you. Great point. And Laura?
Well, I think with social media, sourcing candidates has become far different than one, right? I mean, I can remember after having my first child sitting on the floor in my family room with stacks of resumes, going through them and shuffling and et cetera. And so looking at, automation from the perspective of being able to hit a button and send in a resume to a bazillion places with Indeed and et cetera. And so those are kind of all the now traditional ways to source talent. But when you leverage your employer's brand, leverage your employees, intentionally attend job fairs that are focused on DE&I candidates, veterans, which is what we do. We also attend the Council on Aging's job fair to bring in older candidates. So it is really important that we have a well-rounded mix and diverse group of employees. And so our sourcing strategy is exactly that. We kind of look under every nook and cranny. We use a lot of LinkedIn and do a lot of passive searching for people that have the experiences that we're looking for to bring into the bank. So I think looking at where you want to source your candidates from, what type of candidates that are you looking for, will kind of lead you, like pulling the thread to find the candidates that fit your needs and to be able to expand your DE&I efforts.
Excellent, thank you. Martha?
I'm actually going to talk about this concept from a model that I developed years ago. I'm the author of 8 books, and my first book, you can see this is pretty old, back in 2001 is this book called Indispensable Employees, How to Hire Them, How to Keep Them. And what I did in this book is I came up with a model that you can use generically to recruit, but especially you can use for diverse talent. And in the audience, I had given out a paper here, so you can see the model here. People at home couldn't see it, but I have this here. And so here's what you need to do. There are 3 elements to this. If you're really looking to get a diverse workforce or just the generic first. First of all, what you have to do is you have to look at what you're doing by way of your external recruitment efforts. Then you have to look at what you're doing in terms of what I call internal recruitment efforts, and then also retention. So external recruitment, when a job becomes open in an organization, what do you think people generally start to look for candidates in terms of that opening? Which one of the 3? The external, the internal, or the retention? Anybody? External. So a job is open. Oh, we got to go out and find someone. There is a problem with that. We have a 3.8% unemployment rate. There aren't people out there for you to go and get. Okay? And when you do it, you've got to do long-range planning in order to get that. But do you know what the number one way is that people find jobs? Anybody? What's the number one way that people find jobs?
Referrals.
Referrals. Through networking, through referrals, and referrals to people that are in organizations that have jobs. But then again, I'm, as an employer, I'm going out first. But so what people have to do is they also have to look at their workforce, and they have to create what I call goodwill ambassadors. These are people that are so happy. You created this environment that's so outstanding. They want to go out and tell others, I can't wait to get up in the morning and go to work. And think about it. When you hear someone that says, I love my job, I can't wait to go, I love my boss, what do people usually say to someone like that? Where do you work? And you know what the follow-up question is? Can I work there? Can I get a job? Duh. Okay, so if your employees are really happy, you are not going to have a labor shortage, because there are not many employers, I hate to say this, and I love my employers that I work with, right? But there are not a lot of employers that are there, that are so, making their environment so wonderful that people want to go and tell the story. Yeah. But there's a second piece of that internal piece, okay? There's a second piece to this internal recruitment. So you've got to make your employees goodwill ambassadors. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts was great in doing this. And they would go out to events and activities, and and they actually help people to learn how to communicate and talk. So there was an educational piece of it. But also look internally at your people, okay, for talent. Because many times they may need skill sets to bring them up or whatever, but that also is a great source of recruitment for you. Mm-hmm. And finally, the number one thing that people really need to do in terms of creating a culture where people want to come there, it is this piece about retention. And Inc. magazine had a great caption where they said that, people want money. Yeah, they want money. But what makes them start looking are lousy bosses. Okay? A boss has got to really look at, how do I retain my top talent, my indispensable employees? What am I doing? Gone are the days, if you're a boss, those my way or the highway school of management bosses. Guess what? People, the Great Resignation showed this. 4.5 million people said, I'm taking the highway. I'm not taking this anymore. Okay, so that retention piece is really important in terms of bosses really thinking about, how do I retain my top talent? How do I people are now doing things, and you know how they do exit interviews when people leave? Guess what? They're now doing stay interviews to find out, why are people staying in organizations. Wonderful. Okay? At performance appraisal time, asking people want purpose. They want organizations that are about that. They're asking people, what do you want to do with your life, with your work? What can I help you with? It's about what I call, not the WIFM, W-I-I-F-M, which is what's in it for me. It's what I call, it's about the WIFYAM, W-I-I-F-Y-A-M. Can anybody guess what that is? What's in it for you and me? When organizations start thinking about, I know you're in here, to help me make the money and that sort of thing, but I also need to be helping you with professional development things. Both of you have mentioned that, with professional development for you to reach where you need to go. So to me, this is a model that I think organizations should think really about doing that, not just about the recruitment and the external things, but the other pieces of that, because that way they can have a wider range of people in terms of making their organization both diverse and just for non-diverse people as well.
I love that. What is in it for you and me? Thank you, Martha. Okay, our last question, and this is probably one of my favorites. Are there any ways managers can take bolder action with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Kara.
I think there's a lot of different ways that managers can create different things within their organization to be more bold or more proactive. And as a smaller organization, it might be a little bit easier for me. I don't have a lot of red tape I necessarily have to go through, but I certainly want to make sure that I have an organization in which my staff feels comfortable, being comfortable in who they are and that they can come to work every day. So one of the things we recently did is that I created a lunch and learn. Every month we have a Wednesday, we've set aside 2 hours. I buy lunch and the staff, we do different things. It could be a training, it could be a DEI training, but different things that we do. And the staff has really embraced it. And it's really just 2 hours that it's going to be informal training, but things that the staff feel that they need. Not what I feel they need, that they're going to bring to me that they need. Last month we included one of our interns, and so we may be doing that in the future, but it allows them to open up and really come to me and tell me what they want. And so I think that this is going to be a good practice that will continue. Wasn't sure if we'd do it in through the summer, but I think we are. And so we will be having trainings on DEI in the future. And I think that that's like a bold statement to my staff that I want them to always feel comfortable in coming to me. And as a smaller staff, they can do that. They've done it in the future. I have no doubt that they'll continue to do that. We have a very approachable staff. And I think also, again, just embracing our community. That is important to us. That it sends the message that DEI is important to us as an organization, and it will continue to be. Making sure that we have representation not only on our boards and our committees, but also within our internship program as well. That is exceedingly important.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And also it's important to make sure that your employees are being heard and that they're able to be their authentic selves in a professional setting. But it's really important that they're able to be their authentic selves and be heard. So I just want to reiterate that. Thank you, Kara. And Laura?
What was the question?
Are there any other ways?
Boulder Action.
Yes.
Boulder Action. So simple and hard for many, but I think active listening, and particularly over the last 2 years, empathy.
Empathy.
I think if we listen to our employees and understand where they're coming from and what their lived experiences are, whether it is their DE&I lens, whether it is their homeschooling lens, whether it's the pandemic has hit their family or loss of someone due to the pandemic, I think if we can listen, develop that relationship, I think is critically important, and come at it from an empathetic ear.
Love it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you. Martha?
I'm going to throw out a really bold thing, and this is about not just a manager, but managers and leaders coming together, especially in this forum. It is going to take a village. The village, all of Cape Cod, all the villages and towns coming together to, number one, solve the labor shortage, to number two, look at DEI and how the Cape can, infuse people of color and make them feel comfortable. And I want to just tell you just quickly just about a few efforts that I've been involved in, where whole communities looked at, we're having a problem recruiting people or finding people or moving. What are we going to do? And they chose to come together as communities, as chambers of commerce, as organizations, as schools and colleges or whatever. And one of them that I was involved in was years ago. All of the hospitals, the Harvard hospitals in Boston, were experiencing the same thing. It was a healthcare shortage, and it was really dire. It was bad. It was like, the early 2000s, after people had come off of the bubble had burst, and it was right before September 11th and all that. And so we decided to get together. We were fighting at each other, and we were fighting at crumbs, like pulling staff and whatever, and it was not a pretty picture. We came together as a Conference of Boston Teaching Hospitals and said, this has got to stop. It's not helping any of us, and what are we doing? So we formed a group. I actually co-chaired this event with a bunch of people, and what we did was we said, we need to come together and market Boston. as the healthcare mecca of the world. We are Harvard hospitals. We're coming together and we're going to market ourselves as, it's like be there or be square. Okay. If you do not if you do not come to Boston and have a career, you're missing out on being part of these wonderful institutions. So all of us got together from Mass General to Brigham and Women's to Mass Eye, the big, the small, or whatever. And we said, we're going to come together as Boston as a career. We're going to look around the country. We looked around the country and we found, where are there masses of healthcare workers? Chicago, Illinois, the American Hospital Association, all those places that are there. Mm-hmm. We went as a Boston group to Chicago, held career fairs, held job fairs. We had hotlines. We had goodwill ambassadors. We had people, helping people to explore careers. But to say, come here together, and worked at it together. I worked on another effort in York, Pennsylvania, and this was a fun one, with Harley Davidson. By the way, when I mention these things, people have given me permission to talk about them. I'm not just talking about it. But Harley Davidson, the motorcycle people, in York, Pennsylvania, Susquehanna Light and Power, the Pennsylvania University of Pennsylvania, their Chamber of Commerce, they had a problem that they have an aging population of workers everywhere. And yet they knew that within, 5 or 10 years, they were not going to have people that were coming there. They also knew that they needed, that the population statistics say that the people that are having people are Black people, Hispanic, Latinx, and Asian people. So how are we going to get those people to come to York, Pennsylvania? We're going to have to show them that we are diverse, that we want to move that. So we worked on strategies of how do you do that. They teamed up with things like the HBCUs, the historically Black colleges. They looked at what they could do. And finally, the other program that I worked on was out in the Metro West. And this was all of these major organizations from Bose and Staples and TJX, which is TJ Maxx and Home Goods, and BJ's Wholesale, Marshalls is the other one. And they were looking at it and saying, we also need to start to look at what can we do to bring workers. We all need the same type of workers. We may need different things, but what as a group? They got together with the Chamber of Commerce. They looked at together and said, how can we market who we are? Out in Framingham, Massachusetts, which didn't have a lot of diversity in Natick, Massachusetts, to bring that together. So I want to put a clarion call out to Cape Cod. I would love to see us here also taking that approach to coming together. I adore Cape Cod. I love working here. I think there are magnificent things that can draw others, here, and really looking at those innovative things around housing. There are movements called multi-generational housing things that people are looking at to solve some of those types of things. So I just think that is something that could really be done here as well. So I think as we're looking at this, to think about how as a community to come together with, I know different forces are looking at different things, but how do you bring all those together to market this wonderful, wonderful, as I say, work in captivating Cape Cod? It's like working in paradise.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Kara and Laura and Martha. I would like to open the floor up to the audience, to anyone who has any questions for these dynamic women here on the panel today. Does anyone have any questions regarding how to ensure equity and advancement in the workforce? Yes?
So, good evening, and thank you, ladies, for being here. This has to do with what's going on in government right now, and the fact that President Biden had actually purposely wanted to hire a Black woman. And I thought that was wonderful, for the Supreme Court specifically. And happened to be talking to someone, and they said, well, why should he purposely pick, choose a Black woman for the open position? It should just be the best qualified candidate. So it kind of took me aback, hearing that. So I was wondering if one of you could just address that, just the viewpoint that presented versus, purposely driving to hire someone, that is diverse in an organization or just specific position like the Supreme Court. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Would anyone like to take that question?
I think that's a really tough question, but also as and you know, people are all over the board in terms of the answers to that question. The fact of the matter, and again, this may not be the exact numbers, but there have been something like 115 Supreme Court justices, of which 108 have been white males, and you know, they're saying that there's a black female that's been part of that. You know, we've got, I think, a few other, well, nothing. We do have a few other women, but to be able to look at a Supreme Court that can really look at different perspectives, he's saying that we should do this. And there have been other presidents, as you know, particularly on the women's issue, that have, Ronald Reagan, for example, was Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman. Ronald Reagan actually said, I'm putting a woman in there. And so sometimes, in order to get that diversity that you need when it's not coming through, I think there are movements that need to happen, and that's, I think, what's going on right now. But, you know, these are all really hard pills to swallow for people, and people get very, having high emotions around these kinds of things. But I think when you also look at the numbers and where they are, you know, I think that he's justified in doing what he wants to do with his presidency.
Thank you, Martha. I would like to also just add that it boils down to equity, right? I mean, how many black women have been on the Supreme Court?
And inclusion.
And inclusion, thank you.
And I would say he's being bold.
He's being bold. And that's what we need right now, is boldness. So, I would just want to thank everyone on the panel tonight. You guys are all amazing. I truly appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your expertise, Kara, Laura, and Martha. And I'd also like to thank Cape Cod Media Center and CLI for allowing us to have this platform tonight to be able to speak about these important issues. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great night.